Hey, folks, welcome students, wildcards, and everybody else to a very exciting panel. This one's going to be one of my favorites of the Halloween weekend. So if you haven't noticed, we've been having free Savage Worlds games all weekend long in honor of the many awesome horror properties that Savage Worlds puts out, but especially Holler, which is named after. And you guys should be getting your physical copies of Holler coming in January. And but keeping up the momentum, because there's so many good things we've got. We are currently doing a Kickstarter for Pinebox Middle School, which is in the ETU, East Texas University universe. And here are some of the many creators over the years of this wonderful system. And I think today we're just going to do a nice, easy deep dive, show our appreciation of ETU, one of the fan. Look at that shirt, Scott. Yes, everybody representing. And doing one of the fan favorite settings. I think it really is one of the most approachable Savage World settings, and I love it. It's a lot of fun. So I think that the first question for you all, for the folks who started it when it was just 12 to midnight, before it was even a Pinnacle property, how did you guys meet, and what was the germ of the idea for East Texas University? Oh, sorry, I got to unmute all you guys. I muted you during the thing. Okay, let me go through. Unmute. I have power that no one should ever rightly give to me.
No, definitely not.
Oh, now they're just not going to. Okay, thanks, guys. You're great. Okay, Presto and Ed.
And that's the last time I will ever say anything about that subject.
Oh, dear.
Okay, I'll give you $1 if you say it again, please.
Ed, do you want to take that?
Well, sure. I was a helper in the Bandit Kingdoms for the Living Greyhawk that went on in 2000 when third edition came out. And I was the head of the Thieves Guild, and for Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Texas, and wrote a lot of stuff and realized I would like to actually get paid and do a little bit more than what we're doing. So I got with my partner Jerry, and later a partner named Mark Ramsey, and we decided to put out Last Rites. Now, originally Last Rites was set in Rosetta, Texas, which was just a name I came up with. And then when we started talking about what we really wanted to do, we wanted to create this environment, right? And we wanted to be a spooky. We wanted to really hit the horror stuff, and it's 12 to midnight. And so I said, well, it has to be in East Texas. I mean, I grew up in East Texas, and it is a spooky place. It's the oldest, place outside of San Augustine that you'll find in the country. Nacogdoches, the Spanish and the Native Americans, the Caddoans. I mean, there's just so much rich history in those woods. And of course, the Big Thicket is a lot of fun as well. I grew up in there, and I can tell you that you can easily get lost 15 feet away from the road and never find your way back, because I've done it like 3 or 4 times in my life. But that being said, I said I want to be in East Texas, and I think it was my friend Mark Ramsey that said, well, we need a name. If it's in the piney woods, we need something to do with pine. And the Pine Box hit us, and we're like, well, that's it. And then we went to a convention, and we're running Weekend Warriors, and this guy named Preston was playing, and he said, well, guys, I think you've got something pretty good here. He said, I like to do layout if y'all need any help. And we said, well, why don't you join the company? So that's the way we got all our partners. That's how Neil Hyde and all these other guys got involved. And so that's when Preston got involved, and that's when it really started blowing up. And we made a city map. We came up with backgrounds. We started writing, I don't know how many modules and adventures that we did early on. And we did, what was the name of that D20 magazine that we were writing monthly for?
D20 Modern Dispatch.
Modern Dispatch. And a lot of stuff came through that as well. And, 12 to Midnight got really pretty successful as an independent small company. We had like 5 or 6 companies that sold underneath us. I think we had like 120 different things that we were selling. But honestly, Preston and I ended up doing most of the work. And it was, dealing with artists and editing other people's work. And I mean, it was doing everything except being creative. And that's all we really wanted to do. So
editing is so hard.
Yeah. We got really burned out. And then, so it was like, well, we're going to do ETU and be done. And then we decided, well, heck, I don't know if we can do ETU. We had so much material. And Shane said, well, let me talk to you guys. And that's kind of where we ended up.
Yep.
So how did you first two meet Shane?
Really ETU was our swan song, right? We were burnt out. We were done. We wanted to go out on a high note. And so we put our heart and soul into ETU, but we also put everything but the kitchen sink into ETU. I mean, every crazy idea you could think of, we put in that first draft manuscript. We had, at one point, an early draft of the plot point had aliens in it. There was this whole thing about aliens. I'm sure we'll talk about study abroad in a little bit. An earlier draft of the plot point had the heroes going on a study abroad trip for a semester, and that was in the main plot point. But luckily, once we got it into Pinnacle's hands, they said, "Guys, you got to distill this down to the essence. It's
John Goff
too
took
much."
us under his wing and said,
Yeah,
"This is nuts. You got to cut back. You got to cut back. You got to cut back."
Yeah.
We're like, but, and then it became a good thing thanks to John. So,
yeah.
just like
Yes, it was
Casey's done for us.
definitely much better
Yeah,
for
that's
having gone through that process.
Well, and I mean, speaking of trimming it down, I mean, over the years we haven't lost much. I mean, this has been for a swan song for 12 to Midnight. It has been a staple of Pinnacle and Savage Worlds. I mean, we are decade. I mean, was it 2002? I mean, like right when Savage Worlds came out. Really, is when you guys were kind of hatching this idea, and here we are 20 years later. Still
So you
bringing
had asked
material.
how we hooked up with Shane.
Yeah.
Well, we had just put out Last Rites of the Black Guard, and we'd put $300 in it. We're like, "What? Okay, we got an artist. We got three. Let's go." And we tried our best to make it, professional. We thought it was great. It's not. Looking back at it, the first issue was terrible, but we thought we did well. And Shane sent us an email, and he said, "Hey guys, I got your thing, and it looks great." And we were about to quit because I think we had like 20 sales the first month. We're like, "Okay, this is ridiculous. We're not going to make it." And but Shane sent us an email, and Rich Redmond sent us an email, and those two things kind of kept us going. But Shane said, "I've got this new game called Savage Worlds, and I'd really like for my fans to have this to get Savage Worlds really going." And there wasn't anything else out for Savage Worlds at that point other than the rule book. And he said, I will personally fix it for you guys and make it Savage it, and you guys get all profits from it. I just want it. And we're like, "Well, shoot, who wouldn't take that deal?" And Shane is just the nicest human being that walked the earth, and no one in this business I would rather work with. And I tell you what, it's just been a true blessing for me to be a little part of Pinnacle. Absolutely.
He's got really good taste on who he picks up because
He does. He just kind of gathers talent.
I mean, there's not a dud among all of the properties. I mean, and that's pretty impressive given just the 25 plus year history plus Deadlands, and oh my God, it's just it's great. So speaking of not a dud, a little fairy just dropped off a little message at my door on what your costume is going to be this year, Ed. So I had to share this. 2,000 years will never be used. Endless random tables and does not include clear stash.
At least I still got this, so that's good.
It's good. It's impressive. If I could use some of the white spots. Yes, we could all be. If we could all be Ed, the game designer. If it was just as simple as going over and picking up a costume.
A couple more years, and I have a job every Christmas.
See, you've got the animal magnetism too, sir.
I was just going to say, I have the section that fits right into Ed's face there.
Yes. So we got the full beard experience. The Scott plus Ed equals Landauer, or no, maybe Presto. Presto's got a pretty good beard too. Owen too. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I even have a little beard these days. That's a sign of my age coming on. That I've given up trying to shave.
That was my entire shtick. Everyone's like, "Oh, it's a very impressive beard. How do you do that?" It's like you just don't shave for a year.
At least you still have air, Owen.
Right, that's true. I know.
That is true. That's something I could say for it anyway. Yeah.
I mean, no one competes with the wild lion mane that is Scott Woodard. I mean, that is some fantastic hair, sir. The Pantene
that is
moment.
quite extraordinary.
If you ever don't make it in RPG and writing design, Pantene will have.
I actually had to touch his hair last time we were together.
Hey, Ed, you weren't supposed to talk about
Let's
that.
take that out of context.
The reason I did it was because Buffy herself played with his hair, and I'm like, "Well, I got to touch the hair."
This is true.
As long as
Very
you ask for
creepy.
consent first, it's all good. No judgment. No judgment.
Did I ask consent? If I didn't, Scott, I apologize.
See, you guys are so awesome. So speaking of Texas, we've got some awesome international folks in the chat, and there's Mr. Hensley also responding in Espanol. Muy bueno, Senor Hensley. Very good. Wait, who hates liver mush? Oh yes, Shane has good taste. There we go. Yes, okay.
¿Cómo está, Victor?
All right, welcome, bienvenidos. So, guys, so let's talk about the new crew, the bottom kids, the kids on the bottom row.
Yeah.
This is very exciting stuff.
Oh, I know, right? Owen, the magician, sir, thank you for joining us all the way from across the pond. So for
It is
folks
so
that
great to see you.
it is. Yeah, Owen's a good friend. We like Owen.
Yeah.
It's been I have been quite out of the scene for over the last couple of years. It's been a weird couple of years. You know, people say that there were two different kinds of lockdown. There was those for people who had kids and those people who didn't have kids. And I think the first one was doubly so for those of us who had kids who were under the age of 4 in a 2-bedroom London flat.
Yeah.
It was
It's a different kind of horror, right?
Did you see Owen's face when he said that?
So we're out of Savage Worlds Fear Table territory and into Call of Cthulhu.
Well, we're glad to see you again.
Right.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys.
So speaking of Call of Cthulhu, we have unlocked the Cthulhu Monsters for the Horror Companion.
Very exciting.
Which is amazing, and that's on the Horror Companion side. And I'd be remiss to not note that our Kids on Bike setting is doing a little more better than the other Niños and Bicicletas setting. And just putting that out there, guys. Just putting that there. Ours is the real deal. Although Scott got to work on both, so that's amazing. I'll get to you in a second.
That's true. Yeah.
I already invoked Owen. So Owen, tell us, sir, what's been your contribution to the ETU universe? I know it's really cool, but tell us, what did you get to work on?
Well, I when I was doing a Deadlands LARP many years ago, this was I'm not going to go into the full details, but discovered that it was very easy to LARP with Savage Worlds as soon as we got smartphones with apps that just did the dice rolling for you. And so for 3 years, ran a Deadlands LARP in London. Yep, Red Claw understands my pain. Thank you. And as part of that, a lot of sort of stories came out, and I messaged Shane at one point saying, I've got lots of stories. I'd like to write some for you. And through that, I ended up doing a one sheet called The Taxidermist's Tale, which was based entirely on a trip to a very strange museum I went to in Paris. And then suggested a couple of other things. Some stuff eventually came into Deadlands stuff eventually. And then while I was researching stuff for Dallas, I came across and this was because my LARP was set in Dallas, basically. I came across a book called Unexpected Texas by oh goodness me, I'm feeling really bad because I've forgotten her name now. The author. That's it. Tui Snyder, wonderful author, with just sort of all the weird things that were going on. And one of the things about that was this rope hanging up in Eastland that was used to lynch this guy dressed as Santa Claus. And then she released a full book on the Santa Claus robbery, which was a man in the 1920s who robbed a bank dressed as Santa Claus, and he ended up being the last publicly lynched person in Texas. And I thought, there's a lot you could do with that, but it doesn't fit Deadlands. And I know about East Texas University, I haven't read it, but I messaged him and said, I think there could be an ETU adventure in here, maybe. And he said, yeah, you should talk to Presto. So I ended up talking to Presto, and then we spitballed it around a lot. And this is, as someone who tried sort of doing writing, oh, thank you, Jody. So someone who tried to do writing in sort of the fiction world before, writing for the role-playing game world is just so marvelously better, because you talk to the publishers and you brainstorm it with them before and do a contract before you've even written the thing, as opposed to having to write the whole thing and then try to sell it and not. So I wrote that for them, and then study abroad happened, and I was going to wish I had a cool name at Preston. Don't we all? Don't we all? It's true. And they were very kind to ask me to do the British section for that. So that was a lot of fun to do. So that's kind of my involvement with ETU. I think those two sort of major contributions. But yeah.
And yours, so if you guys haven't seen, if you go back to our YouTube cache of stories, Owen actually did a road trip video where he showed the amazing locations that he actually went to, and which is awesome. And then you also, I think you get the title for the first dragon in ETU. I mean, spoilers, folks.
Yes, yeah. I think we're gonna let that one go now, though. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, basically, the premise that was sent to me for to do something for study abroad was we want local monsters, local stuff, and it's like, I mean, if it's gonna be Britain, it's got to be a dragon. You can't not. There had to be a dragon. And then I looked up, St. George and the dragon, and where was that meant to have gone down, and found out, oh right, so apparently he's supposed to have killed the dragon like literally 2 hours from where I lived, which is a long journey in England. I know that's the corner shop in Texas, but that's a big journey. Yeah. So
that's getting groceries, yeah.
And and saw the place, and while I was there, I mean, actually, and the thing what was most random, really, I think, is while I was looking at it, I think my mother was there with me. My whole family was there. My son was there. My wife, my parents came as well. And she pointed out a lone hawthorn tree and said, that apparently a single hawthorn tree standing on their own are meant to be a gate to the fairy world. And that almost actually became the most significant thing I discovered up there. Other sort of local little landmarks and so on. We brought in however I could, really, because I mean, even a tiny village like that in England, if you look well enough, you can find lots of little bits of lore and stuff, such as the clock in the church and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean,
and I have got some copies of them. I haven't gone back yet, but I am planning to go back to deliver to some of the people who helped me out their actual physical copies of Study Abroad to say thank you.
Oh, that is awesome.
Cool.
I mean, there really is no substitute for doing a little bit of research or having some authentic, life experiences. And I know Ed has been dropping some really cool posts all this last week and a half in the East Texas University Facebook page. Hopefully we'll compile some of those and we'll put them on a post on the actual Kickstarter, because those are great, Ed. But so is Scott. So Scott, let me go find. Tell us about you were the original creator, the origin story for Pinebox Middle, and and you've been hinting. You hinted during our last stream that there was some deep childhood. I don't know if trauma is the right word, but experiences from real school that you were going to finally share. So I'm going to let I go back and grab them. You posted a picture of some of your movie influences, and I'm going to show that. And we'll talk about. We'll see if chat can guess which movie you actually worked on.
Oh yeah.
But while I go and grab that, give us some of the history on your actual what school experiences you wanted to work through in some informal RPG therapy for East Middle School.
Well, I mean, the good thing for me is that while I live in Los Angeles, I grew up in a tiny, tiny little village in upstate New York. And I went to college in a very small college town as well. There are shocking parallels between Pinebox and the places that I grew up. I think that's kind of pretty common amongst small villages and small towns. We can all find commonalities amongst wherever we grew up. And so it was really interesting to be able to work to fit the bits and pieces in that I grew up with into Pinebox. And what was also a lot of fun was getting the ETU Pinebox setting and seeing all the little gaps, not necessarily gaps in story and plot, but also gaps in time and what has changed in the real world over the years since Pinebox or since ETU was released. And so that was sort of my goal, was to look at the small town and small village that I grew up in, see what changed there, and apply a lot of that to Pinebox. And I think for the most part it worked, because you were able to really sort of dig in and say, okay, we've got a college town. Well, let's see, over the last few years, what are some things that have taken a lot of hits? bookshops, for example. Bookshops have had to evolve. So I've adjusted a few things with the bookshops in Pinebox, and don't worry, Mary Lynn's is just fine. But there's a few other things like that. What has come into the fold in small towns like that over the last few years, and so those are there now. Pinebox has now filled in some of those gaps, even though not everything is exactly as it once was. But another thing that was a lot of fun too, and this kind of goes back to Owen's contribution and other people who have worked in the setting, I was able to go into sort of some of the smaller products that have been released for East Texas University, which I'm sure we can talk about, and make sure that if there was a movie theater mentioned in an adventure that we released 5 years ago, that theater needs to be in Pinebox because it wasn't in there before, and now it is. So there was a lot of things like that. They was able to codify and make sure everything that we've released is finally in one place.
Yeah. So that reminds. So one of the things that we weren't able to do for this Kickstarter, because this reminds me, like the whole Pinebox thing, you know, like an allusion to a casket. When I first played ETU with Ed was we brought Ed up to I think it was a TaxCon or Kangaskhan many years ago, and he brought toe tags for your characters, and I still have my toe tag in my dice box because
that's fantastic.
This is so thematic and awesome. But the we were thinking about like we just couldn't get it sourced, but we were thinking about doing a pine box and actually doing the box set made out of pine. A little tear cries that COVID has prevented us from getting this.
Right.
So maybe one day when the shipping crisis is over and we can do it, but like they're actually maybe there's some I can't make promises. I'm not on the production side. I just get to be a fanboy. But
well, I know like when I was going to say, when I first started working on it, of course, in my mind, I was thinking, well, what kind of products could we do? What kind of special editions could we do? And I just had this vision of, the actual yearbook for the middle school yearbook and to do a cover and everything for it. But, there's only so much you can do.
That's true. All right. And the only viable printing that's still in North America is yearbook printing. Pretty much everything else you got to go to Mexico or overseas, or it's but like yearbook printers are like the one that's still in America, and that'd be funny. Fun. But I know our fans would be like, wait a minute, the books don't line up anymore because they don't print yearbooks in the comic format that we use now. But so as long as I got you on the hook, so this is you did a really cool post where you post some of the. Pardon, folks in the middle. Sorry, Presto and Tracy. But these are some of the movies that you have cited as inspiration for your work.
Books and movies. I think there's 3 book covers, of course, there, and then a bunch of movies. A couple things that were made for TV movies. The list as well that I posted in the ETU Facebook group is significantly longer and features a lot more movies, and all of those films and shows and books I was actually referring to while writing Pinebox Middle School. So I've been immersed in all of this stuff for many, many years now.
So Benny to the chat. So one of these films Scott actually worked on.
Yes.
And so guesses in the chat, and we'll see before the end of the show. My initial guess was Super 8 because that is totally down. Like Scott also wrote a book on fantasy properties in film and cinema, and it's a fantastic book. If you haven't picked it up, we will have to I'll try to get the Amazon link. But I'm like, Super 8 totally sounds like right up Scott's lane, like classic director, pretty good material. There's some other ones in here that are actually pretty cool. If you think about what Scott's done, I think you might be able to guess it. But yeah. So guesses in the chat on which one of these. Also Lost Boys, love it. But I think you're a little young for being Lost Boys.
I would have been a little young there. One thing I wanted to toss out related to this, but Ed and Presto, I actually have, I think, everything that 12 to Midnight ever released on my bookshelf. So I was one of the 20 who bought
that. Well, and that's the cool thing.
That is quite an accomplishment.
It's appreciated, my friend.
Thank you for that.
In the current Kickstarter, you can go all in. There's an add-on that'll do. It's not all of 12 Midnight, but it is all of the ETU universe that you can add on. So if you guys have not gotten in on the ETU universe before, so why don't we do the rundown? So there was the original ETU, right, and then you guys extended it to grad school with Degrees of Horror. No.
Degrees of Horror is the Plot Point campaign, and
okay.
Savage Tales. It's not grad school.
Yeah. Yeah. So ETU was just the GM player guide setting book,
Okay.
and then Degrees of Horror was the plot point campaign for it.
Oh, very cool. Okay, my bad. And then we went overseas. So Owen and crew did, what was it, Italy, Poland, UK, and then like Costa Rica.
Right.
For all the 4 different locations you could study abroad. And then this is in the same universe, but we're going back to middle school, so not high school. Oh, we had some creepy comments on it when we first put it. I was like, no, there's no band camp here. This is middle school, not high school. Your relationships are with your brothers and sisters and your parents, and or first crushes and
best friends.
And best friends. That's true.
Yeah.
So talk about that, Tracy. So Tracy is done an amazing job, kind of helping us get this ramped up for the Kickstarter, and has added some cool mechanics.
Amazing job.
So talk about what makes this one modern, and we'll get back to Scott with the cell phone thing because that's just too cool. But two, like who are these kids? What are they doing? What are the challenges they're facing? What are the new mechanics of family?
Yeah. So the vibe of Pinebox Middle School, at least the way I've been running it and the way I've been sort of looking at it, is these kids. I want kids empowerment, right? Kid empowerment. I mean, like allowing. We've talked about this before, but allowing adults to go back and sort of live that life and say this is what I would have liked to do when I was a kid. This is what I would have liked to say to my parents sometimes. This is what I would have liked to say to my teachers sometimes. I want my own important thing to do. The thing that I can do that no one else can do, right? That's what we're sort of capturing here in Pinebox Middle School. It's not something we outright say, but it is something that has certainly been thought about throughout the development of the setting. And so these kids are doing everything from, fighting monsters in the closet to fighting, some pretty big bad monsters that would scare adults. I mean, seriously scare adults. I mean, the monsters are serious no matter what, but there are certainly some very scary ones, and there are certainly some more campy ones that allow you to sort of, have that vibe depending on what you're looking for. And Scott's plot point campaign is very specific in the way that it expresses itself. Like it is a very specific thing. It's very based in sort of a weird science zombie kind of thing going on, and you can see Scott's pedigree with Flash Gordon and all that stuff sort of really infused in the plot point campaign. And so it's unique, and in that way it is unique. You're not going to find something like that in other settings. You're just not. And so that's part of what makes it unique. And the kids have to deal with it. They have to sort of they have to discover what's going on, and they have to deal with what's going on in a way that the parents and the teachers out there just are not going to help them. They're not, they don't believe them. They don't care. They're too busy. All that stuff is going on, but it's important. It's important. And like I say before, it's one of those things that kids get to do that the adults are not going to be involved in. And you get to have that feeling, like, okay, we're 13 years old and we're going to take on this horrific demon or whatever, and no one else is there to help us. And if we do it, great. If we don't do it, then, we have to figure out another way, And that's the vibe of it. And that's, at least that's the way I run it. In addition to dealing with family and all those obstacles that the modern world presents you, like trying to sneak out of the house and trying to convince your parents not to, convince your parents that, yeah, I had to trip the fire alarm. And yes, I have dye all over my face now, but I had to do it. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. And the kid and having to deal with the adult reaction to that, well, I had to pay a $2,000 fine for you. You're grounded. and then just flouting that anyway. That's part of the fun of the setting. It's the same with ETU, except more adolescent problems, right? With ETU, you've got your relationships and your drama and your all those sort of college growing up, sort of coming of age things. This sort of just regresses it back just a little bit, and allows you to sort of play through some of those maybe not so fun problems you had when you were a middle school student, but now they're fun. You know,
Adding puberty on top of all that stuff just adds a whole new level of horror. It really does.
it does. It does.
Yeah, another thing I really wanted to do too was I wanted to add a sort of naive perspective of the world. And what I mean to say is that, okay, this is gonna be a tell-all. When I was a kid, I was in middle school, and a good friend of mine and I had a suspicion that there was something secret going on at this tool and die factory that was on the other side of the woods from his house. And yes, we did dress in black and sneak back there in the middle of the night while they were working to try to figure out what was going on. Of course, it was a tool and die factory. It was a late night shift. Nothing at all serious about what was happening. But in our minds, there was something going on. It was intrigue. It was James Bond level espionage related stuff. But so that was one of the things I wanted to make sure was in the game, was that a kid looks at the world in a completely different way than an adult does. We immediately leap to the logical conclusion. The kid takes a few steps to get there.
Yeah, there was one. I'm sorry, Ed, go ahead.
Scott did an amazing job coming up with exploits, because that totally fits, the middle school kids. How do I beat this game? What's the secret code? And when he came up with that and I read it, I was like, that's just amazingly perfect. And I can say that as far as what Tracy was saying, in my home game of Pinebox Middle School, played it a few times, and every time the most fun we had was, how in the heck are we going to get out at night to go do blah without mom and dad catching us? I mean, we had so much fun with that. Like that, getting your older sister to give you a ride and she doesn't like you very much, or it was a lot of fun. That was that role play aspect, I really think, makes this whole setting, the family, the connections, that's just good stuff.
And to me,
hey Shane, I do remember the rest of that night because we almost got caught. we had to run for our lives, so I remember it vividly.
No, I mean, it's just totally Stand By Me, right? I mean, like, the horror of that movie really comes in, and is like, how do kids get across town? Not really that there's any other real danger. The real danger was like the infrastructure, the train trying to kill them, the leeches, but it's still an amazing, like, from a kid's perspective. I remember that movie vividly. Because I was not smart enough to know that it wasn't Castle Rock, Colorado versus Castle Rock, the non in Colorado. But Stephen King wrote the stand for Colorado. But I'm like, there's no swamps in Colorado. Castle Rock is like dry. Where's the swamp and leeches coming from? But stupid kid. But but it was tripping that whole the innocence of youth. I mean, even like I remember in college we had. Like the Loma Prieta earthquake condemned a couple buildings on the campus, and there was the Chem building. It was this gorgeous old red brick building, but it was condemned and it was fenced off. And there was all these rumors about what was going on there at night. And what was really going on was remediation to eventually tear the building down because it was unsafe to be in. But lights going on and drills and sounds, and so it was a very popular thing for freshmen to try to go sneak in there and see what was going on in the Chem building. And even an innocent little school building, you walk into a Chem classroom that still has like the beakers from 20 years ago when the earthquake happened, but they're all dusty now, and it's just like and other people have left notes in the dust. It's like super scary. I mean, it's just a stupid building, but I mean the amount of like let's go in the steam tunnels and all that stuff. That was college, let alone middle school. So one more question for you, Scott, on this is like, how did you keep the sense of adventure, that sense of wonder, when I think in reality the difference between the 80s and now, because this is modern. Mm-hmm. We've got helicopter parents and play dates and that lack of freedom. So what kind of things in the game, how did you overcome that to keep the ability for the kids to go and do adventures and have fun?
Well, I mean, a lot of that's going to come into the play style. I mean, helicopter parents, if I remember correctly, we've set up as a hindrance, right?
Yep.
Something along those lines. Yeah.
Absolutely there is.
Oh, absolutely.
Helicopter parent is a hindrance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Dude, we thought of everything. Trust me. So yeah, it's really going to come down to trying to work your way around this. I mean, the goal obviously is to have the people at the table, whether they be adults having a nice little nostalgia trip or actual kids playing, which I absolutely cannot wait to see. I want to see how they both approach the adventures in their own unique way. Is it going to be? I mean, in a weird way, I would love to see the exact same adventure recorded live and then compare how the kids do compared to what the adults do, and trying to deal with as you say, helicopter parents, or responsibilities with school, or dealing with the fact that there are police and you can get in big trouble if you do certain things and get caught. So yeah, I mean, it was really just trying to factor all that stuff in, figure out, well, how are the players going to get around this stuff? But you know what? The fact is, most of that stuff we all did get around. We all did figure out ways to get around that stuff. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility. One little side strap. I was going to toss one quick thing. Just, you were talking about that building, and of course I said my thing about sneaking off. One more, and this is just because it's Halloween and we want to put some scary things in. I have another great little story, which will think about this from a kid's perspective. Walking out into the middle of a field when I was 12 years old, snow-covered ground, suddenly blood everywhere, and a skeleton of a deer that had been probably savaged by some dogs. That's the logical story there. This really happened, but of course in our minds, oh no, there was definitely something at least 30 feet tall out there that was eating deer. So again, that stuff factored in as I was writing it. I was remembering all these crazy little stories.
So I'll throw this story in, Scott. Growing up in East Texas in the Big Thicket, I was in the woods from the time I was 4 years old. My mom would say, "Don't go." Of course, I went. Right, we'd follow the creek and we go way off into the woods. And I remember me and my friend Scott Austin, I think it was. No, I take it back. Alan Champion. Me and Alan Champion were way out there. I was like 7 years old. Now, this is in the middle of the forest, and we came across a tombstone and some old barbed wire that was so old that trees had grown around it. But we found a tombstone out there that was just laying on the ground, and we were just like freaked out. 7-year-olds were like, "Oh my gosh!" We're in the middle of the woods, and there's a tombstone in the middle of nowhere. And I mean, it was just that's kids. And we had fun, but oh my goodness, I'll never forget that.
Oh, good story. So Owen, tell us, is the helicopter parent and the kids on bikes thing, is that quintessentially American, or what's the kind of culture in the UK on kids and adventures? And
yeah, I mean it's not as much of a modern thing to the same extent, I think, or more of a staple to our culture. I've just kind of been. I actually Googled helicopter parent there because I wasn't sure what it was, and I was, while listening to your stories, I was thinking, oh God, I don't have anything like that. But I have a very different school experience. I went to a very privileged private boarding school, all boys. The things that were turning up in the woods would. Let's not talk about the things.
That sounds terrible, man.
Yeah,
so that's why we get Harry Potter instead of
that.
E.T.
But a very different situation. But so our kind of sort of kids on bikes equivalent, I suppose Just William, that kind of stuff, which I don't know if you guys even know what that is. It's a series of novels, sort of in more Victorian time stuff, and the Railway Children and that kind of stuff is kind of where that sort of culture is in that regard. I mean, we've got a lot of school stuff, but it's mostly comedy. We have the In-Betweeners, which I think has made it stateside. That's a very much more traditional modern British school experience. Is that no, you're not riding your bikes around and going on adventures. You're getting bullied from the fact that you're the guy that got sent in with a briefcase and getting up to those kind of utterly pathetic hijinks that we tended to get up to at the time, and so I mean, watching Stranger Things and the Goonies and stuff like that, it's similar, but yeah, you either live. If you live in the middle of nowhere, you live outright in the middle of nowhere. There aren't any other kids to go out on adventures with, and then you're probably going to a boarding school if that's the situation, or at least used to be. I mean, there aren't really many boarding schools anymore. And then good luck going on an adventure when you're in a boarding school. You're not getting out of those grounds. so I sort of exercised all these demons for myself in my own ridiculous setting, which was 90% therapy for me.
And I will have you know that I did think about the Famous Five. I was working on Pinebox Middle School.
The Famous Five is a perfect example, actually, of sort of that and where that kind of thing is in Britain. It's more those kind of oh golly, jolly larks and ginger beer and we've done something frightfully naughty today, haven't we? Mum didn't know we didn't get us home in time for tea, and we bested our rivals at cricket and marvelous.
We got mud on our wellies.
Yeah, exactly. Which is about as far from what a sort of normal British person's experiences of school these days is it can be. But that at the same time, there's the kind of stuff that Pinebox Middle School is drawing on is such a staple of sort of universal culture now that it doesn't matter where you're from in the world, you're going to be able to pull right into that. It's all those wonderful sort of kid heroics. And I think what you were saying, Scott, about that kind of innocent mind, as it were, that goes to those leaps. It sounds kind of like in Pinebox Middle School, that's almost kind of the advantage, which is why the kids are able to defeat the things, because adult's brain goes to logical solutions and so on, whereas the kid makes those leaps, and those leaps in this case are actually correct, as it were.
Yes, and so I want to share
so
a little
cool.
bit about last night, because I ran Pinebox Middle School for Halloween for great players, and all this mixture of both the horror and the dealing with the problems and that family sort of how do we get out of the house things all came together so beautifully. Like there was, I'm like, okay, you all have some kind of personal transportation. You all have a bike, right? It's fine. And they're like, well, we'll just bike to the quarry. I'm like, no, you probably won't, because it's going to take you a couple hours to bike to the quarry and a couple hours to bike back. By the time you get back, you better have a good reason for why you're back at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. and you're going to be exhausted and all this stuff. And they say, oh, okay. So then they had to strategize how they were going to get out of the house. How are they going to get out there? Eventually, to get out all together with all the equipment and stuff that they felt like they needed, they ended up blackmailing an ETU student that is part of the adventure, right? To drive them out there, and he had his whole shtick as well. But they ended up finally ditching him because he was useless to them. Right. And part of the impetus, and this is sort of the beauty of it, part of the impetus of going out there in the first place is that their school friend is in the hospital, bleeding from her nose and ears and almost in a coma because there's a supernatural thing affecting her. Doctors don't know what it is. Doctors think it's a physical problem. They don't have any idea what to do. Right. But the kids do. And so they're highly motivated to go blackmail an ETU student and have him bring him out to the quarry so that they can figure this out. And it has all the tropes of them going and seeing this shadowy figure in the forest and trying to follow her off and figure out what's going on there, setting out some sort of a binding circle to deal with some, bad threat, and then do something really, really scary to save the friends that they care about back at school. And to me, that's a beautiful thing. Like that mixture of all those elements together is really what makes Pinebox Middle School so special to me.
I think
I just wanted to share some of that.
Quite a beautiful thing, like you say, in that, unlike Call of Cthulhu, unlike I'm trying to think of some of those other sort of bigger horror settings out there. The real problem isn't how do we defeat this supernatural demon. It's how do we get to the place that's a couple of hours away. It sort of compartmentalizing things down to these real life problems or something is something that really is going to ground it.
Yeah, I think it's
that's
both.
amazing.
I think it's both.
Beautiful.
Gathering components is still an aspect of this.
But yeah, of course.
It is.
You still got to gather. That's more adventures for you.
So building off that, I mean, for the Owen crowd, the UK, it seems like the kids' adventures is much more the boarding school, like Worst Witch, which is fantastic. If you guys haven't seen Worst
and
Witch,
of course Harry Potter, of course, yeah.
Potter, right?
Although actually, I was just thinking at the moment that in terms of sort of real life, the kind of kids on bikes thing is much more of an inner city thing, actually, and it's kids just getting out of school. You know, we're all living in the estate. It's a very urban, very different to my own personal experience at where I think. But I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Attack the Block. That's what's kind of in my head right now, which is everyone should.
It's on my list of inspirational films.
Yeah, it's a great movie. And really, that sort of proper London culture I used to help out in the city theatre company that sort of did Shakespeare for kids at risk of offending. One of them went on to be the latest Doctor Who companion. He's done brilliantly for himself.
Nice.
But yeah, that kind of thing of like, you know, school's out, let's go chicken shop, lads, you know, and yeah, hey fam, you hear me? Yeah, we got to go do this, yeah, mate, demon is turning up in ends. We got to sort that, yeah. Okay, that I think is probably where I'd put that if I was trying to transfer the setting into a very British environment. That's probably more where that kind of thing is these days in a modern setting. But yeah, in terms of sort of the cultural stuff, I think the stuff is much more. The stuff that we have in terms of fiction is much more kind of in the countryside in that regard. Yeah, sorry.
So I was sitting here wondering. The first thought that hit me was, will the 80s truly peak kid adventure time? Like, was that the peak of the kid adventure genre? But then I started going back. Well, I mean, before the 80s and all that kids on bike vibe thing, there was Hardy Boys. And I have a collection of Hardy Boys books on my shelf right now. I've got like 30 of them. And that started in the 50s through today. I think they're still publishing Hardy Boy books. And before the Hardy Boys, it was Tom Swift, the boy genius inventor. That was before the 50s. So, and to Owen's point, I'm sure there's literature going back further than my feeble brain can remember, going back in the 1800s or even earlier. That's this kid adventure idea. So on one hand, we've extended.
I mean, Treasure Island is kind of a kid adventure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We're inspired by movies and literature from the 80s because that's our generation, right? But on the other hand, this is something that we are just the latest custodians of this idea of kids' adventures, whether it's kids on bikes or kids. The Hardy Boys, they had an airplane and a boat, and Tom Swift had like an atomic submarine, you know. So whatever your transportation mode is, it's these kids going on adventures. Johnny Quest, right?
Tintin and Johnny Quest, yeah. If I only had Johnny Quest Dad's money, geez, my God.
Yeah, right. So here we are now in the 2020s, and we're just we're the latest in this long lineage, this century of kids' adventures, and hopefully we carry the torch and carry it on from there.
But we are the first that I know of for modern kids on bikes.
Yes. In the RPG world, yep.
I think that might be because it's kind of come around culturally. I think the reason we think that the 80s might have been a recent high, at least, I mean, the dip was, you know, you had the like Baby Jessica and the Well, and then the Walsh case, which went really national about kids getting abducted, right? And that's when the razor blades and Halloween candy, and then the kind of spawned the helicopter parent movement. Even though I think in retrospect, the crime statistics have shown that, you know, all of those numbers have been going down rapidly since, you know, decades and decades. It was just a perception that it's not safe, right? And
the early 80s, the D&D is the devil, Satan worship. I grew up in East Texas. Believe me,
So I think that like when we rebelled against that, when we were like, my parents had HBO. I saw Pet Sematary as a kid. I could not watch the D&D cartoon. That was like the one thing I ever remember my parents were being like, no. And I'm like, I'm in the industry now. Look at this. This is a rebellion of all rebellions. Like, you couldn't stop me. But that is a real thing for a lot of us that kind of came out of the 80s. And I think since our rebellion is now in the producer role and making content, you know, we kind of want to go back and restore some of that goodness. And one good question. So Ed in the chat wanted to ask what everyone's favorite Halloween movie is. So I'm going to use mine to start to have a bridge between Owen and the rest of you guys. So the first worst witch movie. There's a Netflix series that's new. You can watch on Netflix. The little girl Bella Ramsey from Game of Thrones is in it. But if you go back to the 80s, it's Fairuza Balk. And she's just fantastic. She was in the Oz series, like the Wizard of Oz, the Return to Oz, and then in like the other really good horror, not Heather's, but the Summoning, the Craft, one of those, like three witches. She was
Tim Curry as the Archwizard.
So
anything can happen on Halloween is a tune.
It is the best. It is a banger. Everything happened on Halloween, and it's got the worst CGI ever, but
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
And also, I mean, Dame Diana Rigg is Miss Harbram, and
when you watch
the
original, you will say Harry Potter stole half of this stuff. Snape is clearly, inspired by Tim Curry's performance, and McGonagall is clearly by Diana Rigg, and the Quidditch and the brooms. And anyways, it's great. It is totally campy. It's a really fun movie, but I think that kind of bridges, like, where you say, like, in Britain, the kids are actually magical, right, for these stories. In Pinebox, it's different. There's not nearly as much supernatural arcane background stuff. So as you guys go around and answer what your favorite movie is, also let's touch on how does magic work in Pinebox? Are there arcane backgrounds for kids? Is it rituals, talismans? How do they interact with the supernatural? So we'll start with you, Press. What's your favorite movie? And give us a little hint on if the OG ETU, how did magic and the supernatural work for players?
You said me?
Yeah, we'll start with you.
Okay.
We'll go around the circle.
Favorite Halloween movie I'm going to go with is Trick or Treat with the R. It's 2007. It's an anthology type movie, so it's not one plot all the way through, but it carries a plot line all the way through, and it is just a fantastic treat. So
Sam is awesome.
Yep. Yes. Yep. So highly recommend Trick or Treat. As far as magic goes, Ed and I felt very strongly that since Pinebox is based on the real world, and we wanted to hew as close to the real world as we could, that dealing with powers that man was not meant to know and that we barely understand should come at a cost. It should be dangerous, it should be difficult, and it should come at a cost. And so that was the basis for the idea behind rituals altogether. It was this cookbook magic that we don't know exactly what we're doing. We don't know how it works. We just know that if we do these steps, then we get this result. And if you deviate from these steps, then something bad can happen. But you have to be very careful because, again, you're paying a cost. You're dealing with forces beyond our world and beyond our reckoning.
My PC got sucked into hell. That happened. Game over.
Right. So, and that's the way it should be, right? It should be scary, and because this is a horror setting. This is not spellcasting the way that you spellcast in a fantasy game, right? You don't have arcane backgrounds. You're not doing the finger guns with bolt or blast or that type of thing. You're performing really scary stuff, and you're just crossing your fingers that it works out the right, yet again. So that's magic in a nutshell. For Pinebox Middle School, we make it not quite as dark. We don't lean into the black magic. We lean away from the black magic, actually. We lean pretty far away from black magic because we are sensitive to this idea of corrupting the youth, right? So we really don't want to get into that. But otherwise, mechanically, it works pretty similar. It's going to be compatible with what's going on in Horror Companion and what you've experienced in ETU. Ed came up with all new tables for ritual components. You have to have components to perform a ritual, right? You got to have all the trappings, the Eye of Newt, and all of that type of stuff, right? So in order to figure out what your components are, Ed came up with all new tables for that to randomly generate those components, or you can just pick from them if you want. But that's magic in Pinebox.
So that's a great lead in for Ed. Ed, your favorite movie, and then talk about a little bit about being an authentic teacher and bringing that to the role. Like what experiences being in the horror of a classroom day after day have you brought to the game? So
figure out how to unmute. Well, I think, my favorite movies, my all-time favorite Halloween movie would have to be Fright Night, the original 1980s version Fright Night. So I keep hearing Brewster, and I just that's my favorite. That being said, I really like the new It movies that came out. I thought they were fantastic. And of course, Tucker and Dale versus Evil, like that's a go-to. That's just East Texas. That is ETU, baby. Tucker and Dale versus Evil is ETU. Let's see how to answer your question. What was the question again?
What experience of being an actual teacher and dealing with students did you bring to the game?
Oh my goodness. So I've been teaching since 1993. So almost 30 years now. And I've mainly taught in high school, but I did spend 6 long years in middle school. And I can tell you.
And some of us did that, but as a students. So
yeah, no, I will not go back.
Puberty is too horrifying.
Puberty is horrifying. And kids are like, the thing that I remember about 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders, one day they are children. The next day they're adults. And the next day they're children again. Like it's like this little switch gets flipped in their brains and they don't know where they are. And then of course with the boys and the voice changing and it gets kind of funny. And as a teacher, sometimes you want to laugh and you can't. If I laugh, I get them to hurt this kid's feelings. I can't do that. But unfortunately, as far as like real horror goes, I've seen some things and had to report things to CPS that bothers me to this day. I mean, you see the best and the worst when you deal with the public, and police officers do that, teachers do that. And there's I got so many great, wonderful stories, but I could tell you some tear jerkers too. And so when it comes to kids, I definitely have a place in my heart and want to see them all do well. And I love teaching. In fact, I'm sitting in my classroom right now to have good internet because I live way off in the boonies and there's no real good internet there.
Well, I think that's the wonderful thing about these games is I think in some respect, all RPG games are working through anxieties, issues, desires, wants, whether, it's like the Maslow hierarchy or whatever of humanity, but you get to do it in a little safer kind of environment and a fun environment. And, the real twists of fate aren't as bad as just mechanical clicky-clacky dice. It's a little more accepting when the dice screw you over versus, the realities of your birth or whatever. So, I think we've joked about it. Scott bringing in, real stories and stuff and a little gaming therapy. But I think that is the value of games, right? It's being able to explore where your brain wants to go to enjoy and even heal some stuff. So I think that's a really cool part.
And I can tell you guys that at some point, if we ever get around to doing it, I have, thank you, Jody. I have so many like authentic Boy Scout stories from East Texas, and we were the absolute worst Boy Scout troop that ever existed. And boy, do I have stories.
So are we replacing the Twilight Legion in the Deadlands kind of series?
Well, this would be the opposite of the Twilight Legion because we were the bad guys. But, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So Scott, your turn. Your favorite movie, and I think it's a good time to reveal which of the films you worked on.
I'll start out with a favorite movie. I've got a lot, but I'm a purist. Original Halloween, Dawn of the Dead, both from 1979, which is a strange thing. But I do have a quick, really super quick story. I first saw Night of the Living Dead in the library of my small town when I was 11 years old, projected in 16 millimeter, and so that has a very important place in my heart.
Even just the sound of the projector in the background. It's like, right? Yeah. It's like a heartbeat. It makes you. It makes your pulse go higher. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. And the smell. But real quick, yes, Evil Dead as well. It's fantastic. Evil Dead 2. So, Paranorman. I was the puppet fabrication coordinator on Paranorman. So.
That's a good one. That totally fits with your style, and yeah. So yes, I think the first one that judged on Paranorman, I think Akadokin. Congratulations, We'll shoot you a Benny for the fantastic first guest. And I think the other guest was good there too. So awesome. So actually, as long as we're here, like we don't have to stop at the hour. We got nothing to do unless you guys got a game at the top. But being a puppet coordinator, you have a family connection to like the Stan Winston legacy, which is really cool. So why don't you talk about just a little bit of the cool stuff you and the missus get to go into, which is it's too cool.
Oh, I mean, it's nothing to do with Pinebox or anything like that. But no, my wife, her IMDb record is significant. I urge you to go look it up. You can look me up, and then I'm connected to it. But her name is Tamara Carlson Woodard, and she works on little things like The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, and she's worked on a bunch of Marvel Cinematic Universe films and stuff. So fun pedigree.
That is
amazing.
So cool. I know Jody and I do live vicariously. So Scott is the amazing guy who does our newsletter, and he got to go to London and show off recently. And so Jody and I were like just totally jealous and of all the cool stuff.
But I caught COVID while I was there, so
worth it. #. I'm glad you're healthy again, because that's catching it and having to get on a plane. No bueno. Although you could have been like, what is the 28 days later, and you've been like patient number 1, bringing it to the US and all that stuff.
Crazy coincidence. I caught COVID in London as well.
Whoa.
London Film and Comic-Con in our case.
What are the odds?
I know, right? Yeah. All the places I got to go.
Yeah. I mean, I feel sad for all the folks who did pandemic-style RPG games. It's like no one has a taste for that anymore. We lived through it. I'm sorry. But we don't want to live the plague. No.
I don't think there's anything having to do with it in Pinebox. We definitely skipped that right over.
So one of the cool things I want to have you talk about again is, because this is a modern setting, and we don't necessarily have kids who are arcane background. Talk about the cell phone mechanic again, because that to me that's just a very cool way of bringing the theme of modern, but not like ruining horror as a genre, because kids could just call emergency services or call their parents or be called by their parents. I mean,
right.
Cell phones are a tricky thing to deal with in horror, and I think this is a great way of dealing with the table and not removing it. Like you don't put it off the table and just say we're not going to do with it. I don't want to do. You got a really clever mechanic. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and you guys, you're welcome to jump in on this. So, I realized that there was, cell phones we think of them as such a blessing, but when we're actually out in the middle of nowhere trying to investigate something, and we don't necessarily always have the luxury of being able to pop on and look something up in Google. Sometimes those bars ain't there, or your battery's dying, or whatever other factor may be playing negatively on your electronics. So we didn't want to just go with the route of, it's a supernatural thing, which still can be definitely an influence, but I didn't really want to go down that route. So we really just embraced the real world. Sometimes when you're isolated, when you're underground, we actually have a mechanic now that it's going to be affecting your bars and your battery life. You guys, if you want to press, if you want to jump in on that too, I know, because you guys embellished some of the stuff that I came up with, but I think it's really works great.
It does, and I mean, we may have embellished it a little bit, but not much. It's still really your mechanic,
right.
And it works beautifully. It's the idea that battery is a limited commodity and something you need to plan for, and it's the idea that signal isn't ever present. If you are a city dweller, you were born and raised in a city, and you're used to ever-present signal. That's just not the way it is in a rural environment. It is not at all uncommon for dropped calls, for one bar or no bars. And Scott's mechanic does a beautiful job of taking that and making it part of the adventure, right? It isn't about shutting you down. It is about creating opportunities for role play and about creating, I call it surface area. It's more surface area for fun, interesting things to happen as part of your adventure.
And I will tell you, Deep East Texas is terrible terrible on cell reception. It's bad enough where we live here in Central Texas, because I'm talking to Preston on the phone driving home, and there's about 2 spots where the call will just drop. It's gone. Just gone.
Yeah, and
He knows. It's like, it'll call me back when it gets the other side.
Also, everybody knows. I mean, everybody who's like gone into an area where you've got like 1x data service, right? And you're trying to surf the internet, and how fast that actually does drain your battery. Like, it just sinks it down. So it's kind of those things that we're trying to do in a fun way to make sure that we have that feeling that that's there, but also that we're not shutting you down. We're trying to create opportunity for role playing. Yeah. And we do that also with the mixture of technology and magic as well. So we add a little bit of flavor in various tables throughout sort of the book that give you that sense that, okay, your substituted component works, but you subtract one of your task tokens and every electronic device in the area has their batteries completely drained. Like, and it's like, why? And then suddenly it's a thing. Like, it makes sense for what's going on. And it's an interface with the modern world that a lot of other settings don't go there. Right. And that's part of the fun of it. We're trying to make it fun, not a burden.
Right.
And if it becomes a burden,
creating plot out of it rather than just
exactly
right. And if it becomes a burden, then loosen up on it, right? I mean, as the GM, you have flexibility to do that, And I think that's the important thing that I wanted to bring to it anyway,
So Tracy, what is your favorite Halloween movie?
Wow, I was thinking about it, and I think in terms of the spirit of the answer, I think my answer would be Exorcist. Like, I love that one. That's a good one, and it holds up. It is a terrifying movie, but also the kind of horror movies that I like tend to be more along the lines also of like The Shining and Twin Peaks as a series, where you have this existential, unknowable something out there, right? And that you do that right, and it starts to feel like we're humans, and we feel it. I don't know. I can't explain it, because it makes me feel like there's a connection to the humans that are in the story, even though they're sort of dealing with this existential, unknowable thing that's out there. And Stranger Things is an absolute favorite, because it mixes really scary stuff that they go all in on and say, oh my God, oh my Lord, with a connection between characters that is unparalleled. Like, connection between the audience and the characters that you care about, and the connection between the characters themselves, that they care about each other. And that is a mixture for horror that is just chef's kiss to me. Like, that is what I love the most. So those are my answers.
So here's a question I might get scolded for, as we haven't prepped before. But one question came up on the Kickstarter about Stranger Things, and whether or not there would be like a 12 type character or a 13 type character. Is that something that's possible in Pinebox Middle School, or is it something we haven't decided yet?
I'll answer that by saying that Shane and I are talking about it, and we will certainly interface with Ed and Preston to see what the possibilities are.
That's cool.
It is not decided yet.
I will say that the early draft, I was embracing a lot of that stuff. So
yes,
it's out there.
I don't want to promise anything. I just want to say it's a possibility. Absolutely.
So yeah, I'll jump in and I'll just speak to that. Scott did an amazing job coming up with some really neat character backgrounds and possibilities and races. And honestly, I just absolutely loved it. And I thought, wow, this is like New Mutants. Like, if you know the New Mutants comic book, this could totally be New Mutants in middle school.
It could.
But then Ed and I sat back and we talked about what is the core of Pinebox. What is it that makes Pinebox what it is? And what makes Pinebox what it is are normal humans having to go up against the supernatural and against things that they are clearly outclassed for. And they're facing the darkness despite the fact that they don't have supernatural abilities or anything special. They are just normal humans. So yeah, we ended up pulling back for that, but the book isn't out yet, so I'm sure we'll continue to have those kind of design decisions.
I love this shop talk.
Future supplement.
Right?
Thing is, they didn't pull back completely on it. So there's a door open.
Cool.
There's a door open, and
That's
that's what we're still talking about.
So yeah, I mean, folks, getting to see the behind the scenes on these discussions, it's fascinating, right? And I think that's the cool thing about. Okay, so I don't want to talk bad about first edition Kids on Bikes, but to me, I don't think they had these kind of discussions. They didn't get into on the development of the game like this kind of conversation on where they really wanted to go with it. And I think that's the difference. I think that I really love Pinnacle Products for is these conversations happen, and they happen over and over again. And, you know, whether it's the black edit when Clint goes through, or whether it's the design meetings, every week there's design meetings on rules and design and how does it fit with Suede. I think that's why the system has changed very little over time, is because not a lot gets out the door that hasn't really been play tested and hammered and thought about. And even just great ideas. I mean, yes, being able to have a character like this is a great idea. But then the question comes is everybody playing this character? Is this character an NPC character?
Yeah.
You know, how does it work, right? And I think we had the same kind of discussion in a previous stream about the monstrous abilities. You can play monsters from the horror companion now, and whether or not it's the whole party is a group of vampires, or are you the like high school cheer team and one girl is now a vampire or a werewolf or whatever, you know, like are you everybody else mundane and you accept it, one of the players, or and those are fantastic things to talk about and work through. So I'm excited you guys are even considering it. So awesome job on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to
going back to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Oh, I want to echo that because a lot of people are read this and think about it and then talk about it, and we go over it and then we disagree about it and then we come up with a consensus, right? And ultimately, what I want is for Ed and Preston and Scott to be happy with what we did. I really, really, really want that, but I also want it to be fun for players at the table that I'm running for, right? And if I'm feeling like, oh, this doesn't work, then I'm going to say something. I might be wrong, but at least we are talking about it. And a lot of these discussions, a lot of this stuff that people don't even realize we discuss, get discussed.
It's good. I want to show
really
more play
satisfying.
testing. I want to show more play. I want to film Shane and the crew doing play tests. And just, but the problem there, though, is the one downside, even though I find it fascinating, is that you're going to get the fans who will lock on to the one idea that couldn't make it into the book and be very mad about it. And so we haven't done it yet for that reason, because it's like, we know there's a lot of
that's
cool
why
stuff.
We're cagey about it. It is. We try to be careful. And one of the little things, like Brian Reeves just went through an edit of the book, right? He had great notes. Some of them were real pains in the butt, but they were great notes. I was like, yeah, you're right. Dang it, you're right. And then I have to go do it. But little additions, like he said, we should have aircraft like hang glider and ultralight. Like that's a great idea. That's a legit great idea, because it doesn't necessarily make it into an adventure, but it can be an adventure generator in itself, depending on the GM who wants to integrate this stuff in, right? And I mean, you can have piloting as a kid, so who knows? Right? It's little things like that, things.
I've got, when it comes to ETU, and I think Scott hit this earlier, the continuity, right? The continuity issue. I always see Pinebox as an ever-developing place, like a real town. And Scott and I are exactly alike on our thinking on this. And as we progress into this new era, or the next 4 years with Pinebox Middle School, there have been changes in the town, and I think that is that's exactly what I wanted to see as well, because these people are not static things. And if you know any of my way I write my adventures, I don't like static adventures. I think things are going on in the background. If you're not moving forward, something is. And so I really appreciate that. And as far as the cell phone stuff goes, it's brilliant, and that really was mainly Scott, 99% Scott. And on our ETU forum, Savage Worlds forum, somebody said, you know what? I'm going to totally rip this, and I'm going to put it in my Rifts game. He says, because it will make so much sense. I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That
It's
also
just-
reminds me if we put in soft damage, which we haven't talked about, but that's kind
Yeah.
of a new thing too. So.
Do right now. I mean, we Owen,
Yeah,
we will get to
please.
your favorite movie.
No,
But
no,
the,
this is great. Really.
Well, so soft damage is basically there's a little bit of extra spice to a test with soft damage. That's how we're handling it, right? So when somebody who's testing with a soft weapon causes you can do a little extra, right? The person you're testing, if they crit fail, something specific happens. If you crit fail while you're testing with a soft weapon, like you're trying to use a Nerf gun to, disrupt a big bad guy, and you crit fail, something bad happens to you. It's it's a risk reward kind of thing, right? That's what it's turned into. And I think it works pretty well. And in terms of, it gives you that feeling of you can do something with a cap gun that is a little bit extra than just testing with a cap gun,
Goody, good stuff. And I think, I mean, I'd be remiss. Let's do Owen first, because we've got some good news on the Kickstarter. But so, Owen, sir, what's your favorite Halloween property?
I'm gonna say it's The Great Pumpkin. Charlie Brown. It's probably my
Nice.
my favorite Halloween movie. I'm actually, for all my for all the stuff I've written since working with Pinnacle, I'm not too into horror movies. I was never able to watch them as a child. It's much easier for me to engage with horror properties now that I've actually been writing stuff for it, to be honest. And I absolutely agree with Tracy about Stranger Things. I mean, I think that the combination of the horror and amazing wholesomeness that show manages is just so incredible. And I think something that's very kind of core to both the ETU and the Pinebox Texas Middle School universe. The moment with them singing Never-Ending Story in season 3 is just one of the most perfect moments of television ever created, in my opinion.
That throwback, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. I think all of us, anybody who saw that as a kid, the reason we had to go to therapy is Artax in the Swamp. I'm sorry, that was the first deep cut of, oh my God, movies can hurt you.
Yeah,
and I'm not over it still. Still not over it.
To me, it's the middle of season 6 is middle of season 4 middle of season 4 where Stranger Things really hits me like a truck.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Hey. It did Kate Bush's career a lot of good, certainly.
Yeah.
But yeah, brilliant. It already had. That's a point. Where's the Kate Bush biopic? I want to see that movie. Anyway, sorry, going totally off topic. But yeah, it's The Great Pumpkin. Charlie Brown's marvelous, and I'd love to see it. I want to see an adventure where people are worshipping the Great Pumpkin as a terrifying demon and things are happening there. That's an April Fool's or stroke Halloween adventure waiting to happen for some Pinnacle setting somewhere, I think.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned you got kids now, sir. When do you think the right age is going to be to start introducing them to the hobby?
Well, I've already sort of started with Rory a bit. He's gotten very into. I've been doing. I suppose you call them sort of role-playing bedtime stories with him, as it were. And it's all him. He's not playing a character. It's Rory goes to Disneyland or something like that, or at least it was when he was about 3, and now it's Rory goes to Hogwarts because he's got very into playing Lego Harry Potter. He's not read the books, or he can't read yet, but he's not been read the books. He hasn't seen the actual movies yet, but he's been playing, or watching me play Lego Harry Potter on the thing. Has got very into it. But I mean, it's sort of a 5-year-old. It's a very different kind of thing, and for a 3-year-old, it's a thing as well. It's literally just a sort of make-believe adventure, and he loves to roll the dice, of course, and of course I let him roll the dice, but I'm using a magician's force every single time. So I'm just saying, and now you roll the dice, and whatever it comes up on, it's the perfect result. So it only takes 1 minute for you to do this thing. you know, you're
That's
working
brilliant.
result in that way.
I love
and then, and and then, you know, I tend, funnily enough, a lot of the things that happen in these games tend to happen at night in World, and everyone yawns a lot, and there's something to, and everyone's feeling quite sleepy, so that it kind of gets him into that kind of state. I don't know how much longer this is going to work for, but it's
a good while. Okay, so you're a great dad, Owen. So I'm getting a little teary here because this is my dad used to put me to sleep with the same way. He'd tell me, he'd make believe off the cuff of his head stories, and you know there'd always be the insert character of me, and it wasn't Chris, it was like Christ or whatever. And you know, and that was such a cherished part of my childhood. And looking back on the imagination and seeing things in your head, and just that bonding with your dad. I mean, that's you're a good dad, Owen.
Oh, thank you,
buddy.
And he does lots of, and Ella as well does lots of imaginative play, of course. You know, I mean, standard kids imaginative play, and that's sort of, I mean, it's just kind of wonderful to just let. And as an adult, actually, to be able, and I think a real advantage that we as tabletop gamers have is that it's almost easier for us to engage in these kind of imaginative plays, you know, as long as we can let go of that kind of thing of there needing to be any kind of logical sense or reason or rules whatsoever, and just you'll be
So Owen, since you brought up Harry Potter, I'll mention this. The kids here at this school, at the high school I'm at, often ask me to like take part in their plays. And our next play is Puffs, which is a rip of Harry Potter about this kid named Wayne and the Puffs, who are always the secondary characters. And I get to play the second Dumbledore, because remember the first Dumbledore died. So
too soon.
Sorry. So I'm the second one, and it's a pretty funny show. But,
Spoiler alert.
I think everyone knows that now, I would think. Except for Owen's kid, who hadn't read the books yet.
No.
In the movies. I guess it's just a movie thing, right? So.
He at the time he will be finding out that his dad auditioned for Tom Riddle, though, back in the day.
Oh wow. Awesome. You got any magic for us?
Got nowhere.
So, you got any magic for us to show the show there, Owen?
Oh God,
you're the only true magic user among us.
Hang on. I've got there, that's about as good as it's gonna get right now. There you
go. Owen, sir.
You should have told. If you told me in advance, I could have prepared something. But yeah.
That's pretty good.
Owen.
Yeah, we're easily impressed.
Yes. Okay, so big news in the Kickstarter. We just crossed 128K, which leads me to two awesome questions. One, as long as we got you press, we got Presto and everything groups we only got a couple more minutes. But that unlocks a new stretch goal. So let me see if I can get this up on screen. It's a little small in our art, but here we go. So Presto, I hear you are the genius behind the Doberman Pinscher. Is that true? We have unlocked the more middle school monsters, a flesh out the array of villains to manage the teams with 6 new adversary cards. And let's see if I can't get in a little. Let's see, a little closer, a little bigger.
You should have seen me talking in the art thread that we have, the art approval thread. I'm like, who came up with this abomination? And Preston fessed up to it.
Peak dad joke here.
Yes, nothing to do with me, man.
I personally think it's amazing. I can't wait to see it on a pawn. I might order a second set just to have another one to show people. Like Savage Worlds has a Doberman Pinscher that actually has crab claws.
With actual claws.
That is fantastic. So yeah, congratulations, folks. We did just unlock that stretch goal. The very next one, which I'm pretty sure you guys are going to hit because this is taken off like wildfire, is the horror archetype card box. We know you love boxes to put heads in and other things, but this one fits the archetype cards. And since you guys have unlocked so many archetype cards in the previous unlocks, plus the ones that come with the set, we figured we'd give you a nice little unlock for that. And because we unlocked one, we should be getting out a new stretch goal soon. But yeah, just for posterity's sake, we are 1, 2, 4, 6 backers, 128 over 128K, and a little less than 2 weeks to go on the Kickstarter. So I would be remiss if I didn't share a link to it. So let me do that real quick. And
thank you to everyone who's backed.
Yeah,
thank you.
This has been a fantastic
relief and a huge boon. Like it just means a lot to us.
Right. And I mean, the fact that you guys are so enthusiastic still about the setting allows us to bring all of these guys onto the team and to create new stuff. And Pinebox Middle School is not the end. There's some really big Pinebox news coming. I don't know when we can tell it to you, but there's some really great news. And so, yeah, Pinebox lives.
Can I
folks.
ask quickly, will there be rules for your Pinebox Middle School characters graduating to ETU and bringing one into the other setting?
Well,
I'm not allowed to
should
ask
there
that.
ever be, and I'm not letting the rabbit out of the hat, I don't think. If there should there ever be an ETU 2, there will be something about that.
Well, Pinebox High.
Now, I will say this: we at ChupacabraCon this year, we came up with 3 new adventures called the Legacy Adventures, and the first one takes place in 1880, so it's like Deadlands and Pinebox, and that was so much fun. The second one was in the 1930s, Deadlands Noir kind of style in Pinebox, and the last one was 1980. Preston, why don't you tell them what happened in the 1980 version?
The 1980 version, your college students at Southeast Texas Institute, because ETU wasn't always known as ETU. They were formerly Southeast Texas Institute. Then they got a bad rap for being a party school. SETI. Again, dad joke, pun. Yeah.
Good stuff.
So in part 3, that takes place at a roller derby. You and your classmates are on a roller derby team, and you're battling out with 3 other teams. Sudden death for a cash prize that will go to a charity or something like that. And we use the chase rules extensively. We took the chase rules straight out of the main rule book and tweaked them just a tiny bit. Really didn't take much.
That's great.
Didn't take much tweaking at all to make it work in a roller derby. So
you should have seen Jody's face when she
rules.
realized she got to be a roller derby chick. I mean, she's like,
Yep.
It was awesome.
Yep. So yeah, that's part 3. That's the climax, and it is just fun.
And Glenn Mack is in
start to finish.
So there you go. Glenn
Nice.
Mack is a college kid.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. So we're about to wrap it up, but there is one chat question that's just for me because this is a cool thing. So you guys mentioned how like real history played a real decent part in your crafting of ETU and the middle school and your own history. So there's a really cool movie. One of the chat's favorite movies, The Changeling, 1980. Great movie. Here's the crazy thing about that movie, based on a true story. So instead of the Chessmans, it is the Denver founding family Cheeseman. And it's actually about the Betchers, though. But there is a Cheeseman family and the Betchers. They're 2 of the old East moneyed families that came out, and the Sacred 32, they called them. And there is a rumor that one of the guys who went on to become a senator was actually a child changeling, and the house is haunted, and all this good stuff. And there's the cool thing about Cheeseman Park in Denver is it used to be Boot Hill. In Denver, it was like the place where there was a cemetery. So when I was a kid playing soccer, part of Cheeseman is now been sectioned off, and it's called Congress Park, and that's where I grew up. And when the sun comes low on some days and you get the shadows, you can see the depressions where the earth is compacted more over the old coffins. And there actually was rumored, I didn't see it, maybe it never happened, but that during one of the adult games that someone actually put their foot down through one of the coffins because the ground thinned above it. But yeah, that's a little great piece of Denver history of the cemetery is now a park and haunted houses and, George C. Scott and all the goodness of Changing. Great movie. Anyways,
You'll never look at antique wheelchairs the same way again.
Oh, and little red bouncing balls.
Yeah.
And history was just made because Shane said in the little chat over here, ETU will return in ETU 2.
Yes, we could spoil it. Yes, so ETU guys. So yeah, don't fear about Becky. Folks did ask in the question, like, has ETU been brought up to Suede? It certainly will be in ETU 2. And it's only
new adventures, brand new rituals, brand new. It will not be a reprint of what you already got. It will be the next 4 years.
Good. Right. So yes, we can't back down now. Shane has officially put a stamp out there. So that was a nice little
Preston, we
treat.
got to work.
Right, back to work, folks. Well, thank you guys all for joining us, guys and gals, for joining us for this retrospective. ETU, again, is a fan favorite property. I think all of us who have ever played have a fond memory of playing an ETU. It just touches on so many great things that make gaming and Savage Worlds great. And we are thrilled that Pinebox Middle School is off to the races, and super excited when we can start revealing more about the plans for ETU2 and all the goodness. But a little idea 20 years ago between two little boys in Texas has now branched out all the way to Europe and more. So, guys.
Pretty good for something that was going to be our swan song.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What are we still doing? Yeah.
Still doing the two-step to this one. So we appreciate y'all. So Scott, Tracy, Owen, Presto, Ed, thank you so much. It's been great, and there's more Halloween action all weekend long. There's going to be another stream tomorrow, so tune in for that, folks. We appreciate you, and I think that tomorrow is going to be the duet stream, which is it'll be 6 of our the same 6 previous folks who talked about playing one-on-one, and that'll be tomorrow. But other than that, let's go play some. I got a game tonight that I get to play in for a change. So appreciate all your help, and enjoy the rest of Halloween weekend, and enjoy Halloween on Monday, folks.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.